Are you trying to scale your business without hiring a full local team? Abbas Mohammed's story gives a simple answer. Find the bottleneck, hire smart remote talent, and use AI to make people more productive, not replace them. In this Inventive Journey episode, Abbas shares how cold calls, virtual assistants, and sharper focus helped build remote leverage from hustle into a hiring engine. To chat about this one-on-one, grab a free consult at strategymeeting.com.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of the Inventive Journey. Today we have a great guest on the podcast, Abbas Mohammed, and Abbas is going to share an awesome journey. His journey started when he dropped out of college because he didn't want to work for someone else. Got his real estate license, took a year to get his first transaction, and then started getting more transactions, and then fast forward all the way till focusing on high quality assistance from South America with related to his business today. So it should be a great journey, and he's going to fill us in on some of the details. And with that much as a quick introduction, welcome on the podcast, Abbas.
Devin, thank you so much for having me.
Hey, excited to have you here. So I gave the real quick run through, kind of the start and the finish, but why don't we rewind and unpack the full journey? So tell us a little bit about how your journey got started dropping out of college.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, growing up, I was born in Iraq, came to the U.S. when I was 11 years old, and family, especially if you're from an immigrant family, they're usually very focused on college and education and that sort of thing. And so growing up, that was a big thing for us. And I remember I never really liked school, never really liked college. When I was going to college at the time, I was thinking the whole time, I could follow these different paths. I could be a civil engineer, I could be a doctor, whatever, but I wasn't really passionate about any of that. And I didn't want to get a job and work for somebody for the rest of my life and, have a job that I didn't like. And so when I was 18, 19 years old, I decided to drop out. And at the time, I was like, what business could I start? I had no money. Nobody in my family was a business owner or anything like that. So I just decided I'm going to get my real estate license. And the way I did that is I literally just put it on a credit card. I had a credit card. I loaded it up. I paid like $2,000 for the licensing fees. And then I went out and I hired a mentor at the time, also on a credit card, which was, looking back, that was probably a very bad decision financially because I wasn't sure if it was going to work out or not, but that's what I did. And then I was
And just one real quick question. When you decided to drop out, was that something that you went to your parents and said, "Hey, I know you have expectations of me or going through college and accomplishing all these things. No, thank you. I'm going to go a different way." Or was it one where you said, "Nah, I'm going
no,
to hold
no.
off on telling them until I see if I'm successful," or kind of how did that conversation go, or
Yeah,
lack
no, it
thereof?
was it was bad. I mean, I had big problems with my family. I didn't ask for their permission. I just decided I'm going to do it, and they weren't very happy about it, obviously. And I remember for like a full year, my relationship with my dad was very rocky because of that. In fact, he was like, you know what? I'm gonna let you do your thing for a year, and if it doesn't work out in a year, you better get your ass back in college. I'm like, all right, well, a year sounds like a reasonable amount of time. So I did that, and I remember when I dropped out, I was like, I'm just gonna go all in on real estate. I'm gonna cold call and just put in all the effort that I could put in. And so I did that for literally 12 months. I would get in 7 days a week. I took no days off for a full year. I would get in every single day from 9 o'clock in the morning to about 8:30 at night. I would just cold call and I would ask people if they're possibly thinking about selling their houses. And then later on, I was like, you know what? I have two ears, so I'm going to have two headsets. So I'd have two headsets, each dialing 3 lines at a time. And I was literally making thousands of phone calls a day. And then about 11 months in, I finally got my first transaction. And so then I went to my dad. I'm like, you know what? I got my first transaction. I'm good. Then I got my second. I got my third. And I started making real money. I mean, my first transaction, at the time, I think I made like 20, 25, $30,000 on the first one. And then I got another one that was also 30,000. Then I got 45,000 on the third one. And that was all within like a 2, 3 month period. And so I started making a good amount at 19, and so I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna keep doing this. And that first year, after the first year, I barely made anything, but then the second year I made 350,000. I had all these leads saved up that were planning on selling in the future, and so once they started materializing, business just boomed all of a sudden. But then I was literally working 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. I didn't have any time off. So at the time, I was like, you know what? There has to be a better way to scale the business beyond me just working more hours because there's literally no more hours in the day to work. And so one of my friends at the time said, you know what, boss, you should check out virtual assistants. You should hire somebody from the Philippines. You could hire somebody for $5 an hour, and you could have them do the same cold calls that you're doing. So I thought that was a great idea at the time. And I went out, I hired my first virtual assistant from the Philippines. This was back in 2019, before virtual assistants were a popular thing at the time. And I trained her on what I was doing. I put her on the phone, and a month later, she was producing just as many leads as I was. So I was working 16 hours a day, cold calling, generating leads, and then she was working 8, 9 hours a day, and she was producing just as many leads because that's all she did all day long. So I was like, you know what? This is really interesting. I haven't made any money from these leads yet because usually there's like a 6 month to a 12 month sales cycle in real estate at the time. But I was like, if she's generating leads, I could have another person cold call and then also do the same thing. So I hired a second cold caller, and then I hired a third cold caller. And so now I had 3 people from the Philippines. At the time, I was paying them $5 per hour, $6 per hour, generating these leads. And COVID hit. This was back in March of 2020. Once COVID hit, I saw all my competitors in the market were downsizing, they were shutting down, reducing marketing, letting people go. And I was like, you know what? If people are going to sell at some point, maybe they're not going to sell right now, but they will go back to selling their houses. They will move around. And so I'm going to do the exact opposite. I'm going to put all my savings at the time into just hiring more cold callers, and it either works out and I make a lot of money in 12 months, or it doesn't work out and I go broke and I have to figure something else out. And so I just did that. I hired my fourth, my fifth. By the end of that year, by the end of 2020, I went from 3 people to 12. But then I also doubled my income that year. I went from making 350 to 750,000. And then the year after that, I went from 12 cold callers to 25, and I made 1.7 million that year in commissions. So business grew very, very rapidly as a result of that. You know, in less than 4 years, I became top 50 in the country at the time with Remax. And I was like 22, 23 years old. I enjoyed it. I liked it. You know, financially, I was doing far better than I thought I would. But the problem that I had at the time is I was already one of the top agents in the area. And I was like, you know what? I could work harder. I can get to 2.5 million. I can get to 3 million. But I didn't want to keep growing that business. I felt like it was very limited because as a real estate agent, obviously you're geographically limited to that area. And so I've seen people, you know, expand beyond that, but it takes a lot of effort to go from, you know, 1.5 to 2.5 or to 3 or 4 because of that, geographical limitation. And so I decided I'm just going to invest in real estate at the time. I'm going to take all the money I was making from the real estate sales business, and I'll focus full time on buying up apartments and raising money and that sort of thing. I did that for a couple of years. Interest rates went up, so that business didn't do too well. I ended up shutting it down. And then afterwards, I was like, well, I don't want to get back into real estate. What other skill set do I have? And when I thought about that, I realized everyone in my life has always asked me, not about real estate, they would always ask me, hey, how did you build the cold calling team? How did you hire people from the Philippines? How were you able to delegate? How did you teach them how to do everything you were doing? And so I decided I'm going to start at the time a cold calling agency. Actually, that was the first thought, is I'm going to start hiring people for real estate agents, teaching them how to cold call, teaching them how to follow up on leads, how to convert them into listing appointments. And that was essentially what remote leverage was going to be initially. So I did that for, I started back in, I believe it was December of 2024. We got our first client, and, 6 months go by. I'm basically selling cold calling services to real estate agents. And I just hated every minute of it because, they would get in and they would expect to see results like, an ROI on it in like a month. And like I said earlier, in the real estate world, it's a 6 month to a 12-month cycle. So you have to invest money into lead generation, follow up on these leads, build a relationship, and then they'll do business with you at some point. Sometimes it takes 6 months, sometimes a year. In my experience, when I was doing real estate sales, sometimes it would take 2 years or 3 years, but you have so many of them that it ends up being a profitable business because you have volume, right? But you have to have a big volume of leads. And so anyway, so I started doing that, and I got the business up to 50,000 a month at the time in revenue. And I just, like I said, I just hated it, decided, you know what, I don't want to keep doing this anymore. So I fired all the clients that I had, and I decided to reinvent remote leverage. And I decided going forward, we only want to hire, we want to hire for any business, regardless of the industry. And we're going to cover many different positions like customer service, sales, executive assistants, anything that can be done from home. And instead of focusing on the Philippines, like every single agency, I decided to focus on Latin American talent because, geographically they're in the same time zone. The hourly rate is about $6 to $10, but you get significantly more qualified people that have a lot more experience, and they've worked for U.S. businesses. They work at the same time zone, so they don't have to work at night. So there are a lot of benefits that I had seen with Latin American talent. So I decided to focus on that. And then the other thing that I did differently when I reinvented remote leverage, is I didn't want it to be a staffing agency. Most agencies in this business rely on what's called a staffing model, where essentially you pay them $3,000 a month. They take a 2,200 or $2,300, and then they pay the VA $700, $800. So basically their margin is about $2,200, $2,300 a month, and the VA is getting only a small portion. The problem with that I had, because I hired my first VA was through an agency, a staffing agency. The problem that I had with that is you just never get really good talent, because good talent doesn't want to only get, a third of the payment that the client is paying. And so when I decided to do it, I decided, you know what? The model we're going to follow is a recruiting model, which is, by the way, in the US, if you hire someone through an agency, it's a recruiting model. It's very rare for staffing agencies to keep charging long-term percentages on long-term hires. So anyway, so I decided to bring that same model, but for Latin American talent, where it's a direct hire. You come to us, you tell us what you're looking for, we find you the right person, and then you just pay us one time if you're happy with the candidates. If you're not happy with the candidates, you don't want to hire anybody, you just move on, and it is what it is. But yes, I decided to start that, and this was back in June of 2025, or I'm sorry, June of 2024, when we got our first client for the recruiting agency. And about 4 months later, we got it to $50,000 a month. And then I hired a bunch of people that were working at much larger staffing and recruiting agencies than us. And so, we started doing a lot more marketing, a lot more sales. And over the past basically 2 years, we grew that from zero to now last month we did $1.5 million in revenue. So the business has grown a lot. We have now about 120, 130 team members. And that's basically what we're doing right now at Remote Leverage. We're serving literally hundreds of new clients every single month across many different industries, many different positions. And it all started because I was facing the same issues that a lot of them are facing, right? Most of our clients have between 1 to 10 employees, and we all face the same issue, which is, if you try to hire local talent, a lot of times you have to pay an arm and a leg. I lived in the Bay Area, so like if you want to hire somebody at Panda Express could make $23, $24 per hour doing literally the most basic entry-level job. And so if you want to hire really good talent, you're paying 100,000 plus. And so for a lot of business owners, if they wanted to grow a team, they would have no margin left. And so when we started Remote Leverage, that was basically the main problem I wanted to address. And the fact that it's a one-time direct hire model, Latin Americans, same time zone, $6 to $10 per hour, was very appealing to the market. So we're able to scale it very rapidly as a result of that.
Just no, great walkthrough, and sounds like it's been a great journey. Maybe a follow-up question, kind of almost forward-looking, but kind of present day as well. Aside from the journey, but I think forward-looking as far as where things are headed. I think one of the ones that is we have a number of clients and other people that we work with that are in the industry, and the question that hits a lot of different industries is always AI, how it's going to impact it. I think the perception, right or wrong, is that a lot of times VAs are for simple things, so lead generation, as you said, or for email responses, or for content creation or something. And a lot of people are saying, well, now that can be done by AI. And so and not saying that that's correct or incorrect, I'll leave that to you to flavor. But if you're to look at kind of the next 6 to 12 months, is that, hey, we're not worried about that, things are moving great, we're expanding, we're growing, or if you're kind of forecast out a bit, kind of where do you see things headed?
Yeah, it's a really interesting topic. So we heavily, heavily use AI. In fact, I just did a webinar covering all the things we use AI for. Back in December, we were at 500,000 in revenue and we had 120 team members. Now we're at $1.5 million in monthly revenue and we also have 120 team members. So we were able to triple people's productivity and triple revenue without having to hire more people. And so I'm heavily in favor of using AI in my company, and I think everybody should do it. But in a lot of cases, if you could automate a lot of the more basic tasks, like the day-to-day basic things, but you have to have real talent that can do these jobs, right? Whether it's sales, it's customer support, developers, whatever. AI could augment and supercharge what you have. I don't think it can completely replace people just yet. And so the other thing I would also say on that is that even if AI was to replace the lower level jobs, as long as there are jobs that can be done remotely, right? Like people think of virtual assistants and they think, like you said, it's a basic level job, customer support, basic admin levels, but you could hire literally for any position you can think about remotely. In fact, we have positions like construction estimators, architects, engineers, right? Anything you can imagine, medical scribes, any position that can be done remotely, really, it technically is a virtual assistant position. That's the industry understood term. Like if we try to advertise remote workers or Latin American talent, we get significantly less clicks, significantly less interest than if we were to use the term virtual assistant. So it kind of has that negative connotation. But the reality is, any job that can be done remotely is really a virtual assistant job, technically, right? And so, yeah, I mean, I'm in favor of AI. I think AI will not kill the virtual assistant industry. I think it will just change the type of jobs that get filled as a result of AI's existence. And I think it will move it to higher paid positions. Like right now, in the company, we have 120 people, which is the same headcount as we did 6 months ago. But the type of positions we're hiring for now are more expensive internally because, I don't need an admin anymore. I need high-level executive assistants. I don't need a basic customer, support agent because we've automated a lot of that with AI, but we could now hire more developers. We could hire more architects and a bunch of other positions essentially that we otherwise wouldn't be hiring for in the past.
Gotcha. No, and that makes perfect sense, and that seems to where things are shifting for now, and is probably to a degree, an unanswerable question. It's hard, I think, in any industry, in any business, AI or not, to say really anything more than 6 to 12 months out. You're really just wish casting and crystal balling it, because unless you're in an industry that hasn't changed in thousands of years and has zero ability to change over the next year, which I don't know of any industry that is that way, but maybe there's one out there, then I think that it's always just a matter of doing or navigating things as they evolve, and makes a sense of the direction things are headed, and shifting a bit. So kind of now with that all as a backdrop, both to kind of walk through your journey as well as kind of see where things might be headed. Great time to transition to the two questions I always like to ask at the end of each episode. So first question I'd like to ask is, along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made? What'd you learn from it?
Hmm.
Oh, did I lose you there for just a second?
No,
Oh,
no, no.
nope,
I'm
you're
just
just
thinking.
thinking.
I'm
All
thinking
right.
about it. Yeah, I'm thinking about it. It's really hard to say what would be the worst business decisions. I mean, we make mistakes all the time. One thing I will tell you is I test a lot of different things all the time, and with testing so many things, you will fail at a lot of these tests, but some of them will be so good to the point where they make up for every failed other test that you have. And so I really don't think about that stuff too much. I
Maybe
just try
what
to look at
maybe
the
to
easy
shift
things.
it, what's one of the tests that didn't work out as anticipated or work out as well as you'd hope?
Hmm. Well, I'll tell you. I mean, of course, that how we started remote leverage. I went in thinking that people would have a long-term vision as to when they expect a return on ads and when they expect a return on cold calling, and that turned out to be incorrect because I only looked at it from my point of view, which, like, if I'm thinking about marketing, I'm thinking 12 months, 24 months before sometimes things have a return, and I was okay with that right when I was in the business. But I didn't realize that the audience or the market I was dealing with did not have that same expectation, and they had much shorter time horizon. So sometimes you don't look at things fully from the client's perspective. And I think that's a mistake I've definitely made in the past. But I think in many cases too, it's like you sometimes you have to shift what the client's expectations are. Like if you think about the virtual assistant industry, a lot of it is focused on Philippines-based virtual assistants, right? Because they're the cheapest. And one of the arguments that we make at Remote Leverage is by hiring from Latin America, you will pay a higher hourly rate. However, you will get far better talent and a far better experience. And so we, to a certain extent, occasionally we have to change the narrative that is common in whatever it is that we're dealing with. Sometimes that works out and sometimes it doesn't. Like when we first started Remote Leverage with cold calling, that did not pan out. But however, when we're doing this now with Latin American talent, they are more expensive, $6 to $7 per hour. But we're changing the narrative and it's working out really well for us.
Nope, I think that's and I think that one is hard. I've been on both sides of that where you use some we use a number of people that I'll say work remotely, so in that sense probably similar to what you characterize on the attorney side. They're all US based, so not quite in Latin America, but same idea. But on the other side, when we've gone into marketing and that, they tell you, hey, this is going to be a while. It's going to take some time to get traction, and you understand that on the front end, and then you get a few months in and say, but I'm not really seeing any traction. Does it really make sense to keep paying for a service that I'm having a harder time justifying? So definitely get where that can be one where going in thinking people would understand that expectation and get in there and realize that sometimes people realize it and still don't realize it at the same time. But that makes sense. So.
Yeah.
Second question now is, so now if you're talking to somebody that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what'd be the one rule of thumb you'd recommend?
You got to focus on the business bottlenecks. One of the things I see all the time is as people start businesses or as they try to grow businesses is they focus on so many things at the same time that the business bottleneck doesn't get enough attention and doesn't get enough focus. The way I think about business is I always think about if we wanted to 2x our revenue overnight, 10x our revenue this month, what would be the main reason why we couldn't do that? And whatever that answer is what I'll be working on 100% of the time. Because you could get yourself busy with a bunch of different things, but they're probably not the right bottleneck. You have to focus on what is the thing that is stopping revenue growth at all times and focus on that. And if you're a smaller business, that is far more important because you don't have as much resources. You don't have as much money and team members and that sort of thing. And so if your focus is diluted on a bunch of things that don't really matter to the business, I think you'll have a very hard time growing. And so to me, that's the number one thing. I've always focused on bottlenecks and I will continue to always do that.
Awesome. Makes sense and a great rule of thumb. So, well, now as we do wrap up towards the end of the episode, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook and all these other platforms, LinkedIn. But in my opinion, the best way to do this is to go to our website, remoteleverage.com. You could see exactly how we work, the type of talent we can get you, the regions. We have a bunch of frequently asked questions that we can help you answer and walk you through the process. And if you're interested in potentially hiring Latin American talent, we could talk to you about the different positions we could fill and see what you're looking for exactly. And you can start the process without having to pay anything until you find the right talent. So if you're interested in hiring, potentially exploring Latin American talent, I highly recommend you go to remoteleverage.com and check out the process.
Awesome. Well, I definitely encourage people to reach out, support a great business, expand their network, and if nothing else, make a new best friend. So with that, thank you again for coming on the podcast. It's been fun. It's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you that are listeners that are out there, if you have your own journey to share and you'd like to be guests on the podcast, just go to inventiveunicorn.com, apply to be on the show. If you ever need help with patents or trademarks or anything else to start up your small business, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat. Well, thank you again for coming on the podcast and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Thank you, Devin. Appreciate you for having me.
Straight, it's gotta bend. seeds we plant, my friend. Dusty boots, but a heart of gold. Your story's waiting to be told. Inventive journey, here we go. Through highs and lows, we let it flow. Startups rising, small but shine. Your time is now, your stars align. Cowbell ring and feel the beat. Hustle hard, don't take a seat. Every step you're blazing trails. Inventive journey never fails.